morning nerve. It's time to get up. Brand new day ahead. Let's make it count.
Good morning, Earth. It's time to get up.
That's okay. I got you. Today is a special edition. We're going to do a segment today called Cross Discussions. We're actually having a conversation today about Bigfoot and other cryptids. And joining us on today's show is actually Max from Bitches with Beards. He was actually on a paranormal episode, a Paranormal Pursuit. He also was on, I think, our first Cross Discussions episode.
I think so.
I think so, yeah. So, Max, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Max from the Bitches with Beards podcast. I'm one half of the Bitches. I'm afraid Daniel could not be here today with us, but we are a Washington, D.C. based LGBTQ podcast that likes to discuss culture and trends with all the elegance of two coastal grandmas. We hope you all can take a listen and hear us chat about anything gay adjacent, or just a little bit camp. And we can be found on all major platforms under Bitches with Beards, and on social media under Bitches with Beards or Bearded Bitch Pod, because apparently there was a lot of Bitches with Beards out there before us. And because this is morning TV, I will talk best in my British morning TV voice. And back over to you, Blue and Sky.
Yeah, that's actually why we have you, for two reasons. One, your British accent, and two, for the LGBTQ. Like, see, we like the gays. Like, we're cool with the gays. They like us.
Who doesn't?
No, that was
And
awesome,
there's a
Max.
whole
I like that.
thing, isn't there, about cryptids and the LGBTQ community.
Oh, like bears and otters and all that good stuff.
Right.
No, it's weird. You know what? I'm all set up in my little office. I'm going to, as we chat, look at LGBTQ cryptids, but it's all to do with the outsider thing, and I don't know all that crap, and you know.
Yeah. So, you know what? Let's just get right into it then, and then yeah.
Let's make it count. Make it count.
Now, this week we're actually talking about something that I don't necessarily believe in, but the more I look into it, it's actually kind of weird. I'm actually getting into this cryptid thing, and we're not just going to talk about Sasquatch, although what's so funny? You like that
I don't
word?
know. I felt like you pronounced it funny. Sorry.
Sasquatch.
Sashwash.
So, Max, what is it about cryptids that you... So anyone who doesn't know, actually, cryptids are mythical creatures, or creatures that are said to have been believed to exist, but science says they don't, i.e. unicorns, some would say aliens, dragons, Bigfoot, stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do, but I always kind of thought that a cryptid is a creature that lies between proven and unproven.
Yeah.
And there isn't enough substantial evidence to prove it, yet there's no clear-cut evidence that disproves its existence.
So which one
could be?
But so which one do you think I said that didn't belong there?
So I don't think a unicorn would count as a cryptid.
Yeah, you're right.
In my
That's more
opinion.
mythical. You're right.
It's a mythological species, but then it's such and I think that even the unicorn itself, like, by the way, if anyone hasn't seen it, the film Death of a Unicorn actually goes a lot into the unicorn legend and where it comes from, which is really excellent. But no, cryptid is sort of that, well, I don't believe it can exist. Okay, well, go and show me evidence it doesn't. And then that person goes, I guess I can't. So I think the cryptid is the idea for me of a cryptid is it's a unique and crazy species that you could just open your door and bump into, but probably won't.
Yeah, some people say aliens. I say aliens because
Chupacabras are
sweet.
cryptids then.
Yes,
yeah.
Chupacabra.
Which is actually funny because have you ever heard of the Salish people?
No.
No.
Okay, so the Salish people is a Native American group that basically was around British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and I don't know if you know, but Washington is actually the biggest state. The most Bigfoot sightings is in Washington. So
Yes,
this is
I know
all
that
in
one.
that area where hundreds and hundreds of years they were talking about these creatures that were between 9 and 17 feet tall. They were extremely hairy, and they weren't. It wasn't stories that did they exist? It was no, they existed. They helped our communities, and they would always congregate around this one mountain. So I think it's just kind of funny. It's like one of those things. It's like, well, show me that it doesn't exist. It's like, well, I feel like Bigfoot is not only a modern sighting thing, but like hundreds of years ago they were seeing the same creature. And sure, you could say that one influenced the other, but it's also very crazy that people are coming up with their own stories, their own sightings, and things like that, and they still kind of mesh. And because who really knows about the Salish people, you know?
Right.
So
I think the thing with Bigfoot that I love is that, I mean, so just so the listeners kind of know with this is I I love a cryptid. I am open minded to a cryptid, but it's not quite a hill I would die on in terms of it. But I do think that we need things in our lives that offer a little bit more than what we know, because sometimes, especially at the moment, what we know is incredibly depressing. But I think the Bigfoot legends, I think it makes sense that it's around North America, because at the end of the day, you know, it was until a couple of 100 years ago, it was there was a lot of mystery surrounding it. I don't want to say it was unexplored, because it was explored by the native people, but
Well, speaking
they
of
had a
mystery,
different.
would you actually think? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but what do you think?
Yeah.
Is this an animal, like a myth, or is it like something else? Some people might say multi-dimensional creature. Some might say an extraterrestrial. Some might say even like maybe the son of some gods, like, you know, from the ancient tales. What is your take on it?
Honestly, if you had to give me what I think Bigfoot is, yeah, there could be like loads of legends, and I know the Dreamtime and everything and the creatures that come from that.
Dreamtime
But
is actually in
it-
Australia for everyone who doesn't know, right?
Yes, I mean, yes, that's it's the
Aborigines.
Aboriginal people believed, and they don't believe in heaven and hell, but the dream time, which came before and is where you go after, and it's a beautiful,
Yep.
beautiful belief system.
Look into it, and it goes back 20,000 years. Some say even more. They say 10,000 years of oral history, but they themselves say it's much longer. Their oral history and their stories, they go back. I think they said like 30 to 40,000 years ago, which is a long time.
Yeah.
But like, if you, and I think this is something like, say, Sky, that you brought up to me when we were discussing this episode, especially being British and European adjacent, is that the European folklore goes back to giants, and then you look over here, and native people have these legends of Bigfoot. You know, this I think for me, what I love in a cryptid is a commonality that goes across the globe. That's when you catch my attention, when you've got like some story that even in divided cultures they're coming back to. So was there a period of time where there was a slightly more bipedal, humanistic, prehistoric species?
According to ancient aliens,
is that something
yes.
that Bigfoot could have been, like a missing link style, another aspect of human evolution that, with the development of modern man itself, slowly found itself becoming extinct?
You know what's
And,
funny too
you know,
is like you brought that up there because I was talking to you about it, and it's like, yeah, that goes along with what I was saying. So basically, I'm going to call you Sky. I'm Blue. What I think, I don't really think this. I think this is just a fun theory that we could look into. Is that in most ancient texts and tales there are giants. Now, in a lot
Yeah.
of these stories, especially in the Anunnaki and others, they were mixed with humanoids who were kind of like hairy creatures. So if you mix a really a giant, almost hairless being with a shorter, hairy being, wouldn't you get like a medium, like an 8 feet tall, a 10 feet tall creature with hair all over its body?
Maybe, potentially.
And you know, like you said, the giants. This giant story is like I would like, the giants are stupid. Like, you know, the Greeks talk about it, everybody talk about it, but then you actually look into it, like Malta and other places in UK and Europe. There's like islands where there's steep histories of giants coming in from the water and setting up shop and building these like buildings. There's one's called the Tomb of the Giants, and they're huge, and a lot of them have to do with like the star constellations and lining up with stuff. So it's like, even that, like you say, like there's a deep connection with 10 feet tall beings. And like
Yeah.
I really like that there's so much a commonality between even like it's like, okay, sure, they're different, but giants and Bigfoot kind of sound the same. They're really big, smart, they're mythical. They do good, they do bad. You know, it's just it's very interesting. Have you found any evidence of any kind of like what was it for you that really made you think cryptids would be a fun thing? Like maybe it could be real.
I just remember as a kid loving them, and I think I was a bookish kid. I didn't I like reading and stuff and fantasy. Especially when a lot of like my peers were into sport. Um, I don't know. I feel, and especially as a gay kid, you kind of look for a little bit more what's beyond. And I don't know. I just remember finding it really fascinating. I know my mum used to get really wound up because we would get these books, me and my brother, on like cryptids and aliens, and then scare ourselves, reading them and be like, "Oh, the
Yeah.
aliens are coming! The aliens are coming!" And
For me, it was scary stories
it,
tell in the dark.
it's like, yeah, but and I think that's as funny as a kid. And I remember, like, it's a Bigfoot. I can't remember when I got into it. I just always found it incredibly fascinating. I think it's that want for something to be real. And cryptids were
Hmm.
a fantasy, weren't they? That could be real. It wasn't like witches and wizards and
Oh
Harry
no,
Potter stuff,
witches
which
and wizards are real.
they are, but not. But in the, I think a cryptid is the closest you'll get to that fantasy creature existing, and I think that's what I loved about them, was there was a believability to it. There was a grounding to stuff like this, and say since and he said you've got the Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and then you've got the Yeti and out in Nepal and the
Yeah, which is just a
Himalayas,
Bigfoot
and
that
again.
maybe I always say that Yeti is just what is it called when you evolve? Oh, they evolved. They evolved
Yeah,
white fur to blend into the snow like polar bears.
and that's what I find really fascinating about it, because you've got this like these very similar legends that are divided again by continents. So I don't know. I think that element of it is incredibly fascinating, and especially later on, I love stories of myths and legends and the hero's journey. And I'm not religious in any way. I have no faith, but I do find theology fascinating and recurring themes that again cross it. So again, I think that is the element. I think that for me, a cryptid and Bigfoot is just it just says a lot about the human imagination and the will and
Yeah.
how we operate and the beliefs that we give ourselves. And but Bigfoot, I think for one of them, I think for me, what I love about Bigfoot is, as I said, that there's something believable about the idea of a Sasquatch or a Yeti. You can kind of see it's not there's something about them that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? Like you can understand how they would have evolved.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you bring that up because I don't know if you remember back in the day, like the first sightings and stuff like that, they found footprints, and so
Yeah,
they made casts of these footprints. Um, some like oh they were just really big human feet, or it was this or that, but they actually showed something in the foot. It's called a flexible mid tarsal break, and
yeah.
humans don't have that. It means that your foot bends at the middle as well as the ankle and the toes.
Mm.
And the giant feet that have been seen, they have a special that break thing where they can bend there, and they actually walk differently. So I don't know if you ever remember the Patterson Gilman film.
That's the famous one, isn't it?
Yeah, and they would say that something with a mid carpal, whatever I said, break would
Mhm.
have an interesting gait. And in that film, you see something with an interesting gait. Like maybe it's walking that way because it has an extra bend in its foot.
Yeah.
And that's why it seems to glide across the ground because it has an extra little movement to make it look like it's floating.
Wow. That's fascinating, actually.
So it's
Yeah,
like go ahead,
that was the film that got me. Like, I remember
Patty.
that like you could get like little cigarette cards, or they came with the candy cigarettes, and there was one of them, and that was all like monsters and stuff, and one of them had a photo of the film on it of the Bigfoot, and it said on the back, obviously this film was a hoax, but it was still like done in a way that was so utterly mysterious. Like the surgeon's photo when it comes to Loch Ness, you know, that sometimes that this imagery becomes just as iconic
Hmm.
as, you know, if it was evidence itself.
Yeah, like Nessie,
It,
the
it
picture
was
of
real.
Nessie.
Yeah.
What is that the closest cryptid to where you were where you lived in the UK? Was that like the closest
Yeah,
big one?
yeah. I think there was a couple of smaller little things, but I think cryptids tend to be slightly more of a North American thing, actually. I think or then you go over into mainland Europe, but in England and Scotland, Nessie probably our most famous one.
I
I
think
don't think there's anything
I think
else.
the ape-like cryptids are definitely more American, Native American history, but I feel like
Yeah,
dragon and water types, almost like Pokemon, are Asian and European. Because like there's a strong for dragons, like you can some can argue that was a cryptid, and that something that big, or if it had hollow bones so it could fly, it wouldn't fossilize. There would be no evidence. It's just like these giants where we find there's been so many reports throughout the history. Do yourself a favor, look up Smithsonian's find giants in the early 1900s. They basically said they found these giant skeletons in the Grand Canyon inside of a tomb that looked like it had hieroglyphics on it. So in the middle of the Grand Canyon, there's like Egyptian looking tombs with these giant bones, and they got to the paper. But then, like a couple days later, they said they lost the bones and that there wasn't big bones; it was regular sized bones. So it's like one of those things where it's like Roswell accidentally told the truth at first, and they're like, "No, no, no, it was just debris. It wasn't a UFO." It sounds like it was another one. Like, holy shit, we let them know that there's a giant bone. We can't let people know about this.
Hmm.
Nah, we lost it. We don't know what it is. Same thing with the moon landing. People think it's fake because they lost the original footage. So when you lose the original to something, it looks like you're trying to hide something.
No, I mean that is really suspicious.
Why would you want to hide giants? So it's like one of those things. Like if there's a possibility these things can be true. I mean, like we said, they're in all ancient tales. Everybody talks about some kind of giant. But
Mm.
like I was saying, so there's like you said, Max, when and I've been saying that to Blue lately, right? If it's one or two things, it's coincidence. The three or four becomes a pattern, and if there's all these patterns across, how can you just say, "Nah, it's not real"? And I feel like a lot of people are doing that now. They're just closing their minds to the. You say something different, but I call it magic, and I think that the universe created this dimension for us to experience life, and in essence, that it is a simulation of the universe, and that maybe in some
yeah,
way God is the universe and we are God, and that's why a lot of these ancient religions says treat each other with respect because you're each gods. You got gods inside of you, and you can interpret that as that the God presence in your consciousness is which makes us who we are is linked to the universe some way. And I think that there's superheroes and witches and all these things in pop culture because we have an innate inner ability to be those things, and we can't for some reason. We're being blocked from it. Maybe it's our own belief. Maybe the theories of like, oh, Santa Claus isn't real because you don't believe in him. Tooth Fairy is not real because Tinkerbell. It's like that's a motif. That's a pattern that says we don't believe in something. That's why it's not real.
Right.
So what if we just live in a world because we're constantly thinking it's not possible? So we deny ourselves the real power of the universe.
but a lot of that is to strip back on the modern influences of like myths and legends, because you take the idea of the fairy, and there has been
Which one?
the
Your kind of
scribe.
fairy or like Tinkerbell?
That Tinkerbell,
Oh,
the
okay.
both. But but like the idea of that sort of fairy that really came about during like World War One and two to create an idealized view of England that would be something that the troops out in the trenches would look forward to, and then but before that, these were mischievous creatures. These were not always good, or they weren't this
Oh,
like little
like
this
Loki.
hyper romanticized version. So it's not to say they don't exist, or they don't in some form exist, but you have to kind of like strip back and go, okay, well, yes, that the fairy in that form doesn't exist, but the origins came from somewhere. The vampire, there are people out there that outrightly say, vampires do exist,
Which could
blah,
be a
blah, blah,
cryptid
blah,
too.
blah.
That could be another cryptid.
Cryptid, but the vampire, yes, there has been legends for centuries of, reanimated, blood-sucking creatures. But the vampire that they claim exists, that the Twilight people and all that say, well, they're out there. That's the one they describe is a literary device, is something invented by Bram Stoker, and it's like, yeah, I understand your need to and your desire to have this become real, but at the same time is unfortunately like the vampire you believe in was created by Bram Stoker, and actually the vampiric legends before that, the vampire is not romantic. It's quite a disgusting creature.
Have you heard about this too? I'm sorry, but do you remember a show called Beyond Fiction? Beyond, what is it called? Beyond Fact or Fiction?
Yeah, I've heard of something like, I think we had something like that in England.
No, it's a TV show with number one from what is it? Star Trek.
Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah, he hosted it, so it would start every episode. Beyond Belief, that was what it was, and then there was a Cheston, I think, did it in the 80s before him. But anyway, so the show would start, and he would tell stories, or somebody would come. He would just narrate them, and there would stories be told, and it would be acted out. And then he'd give you like 5 of them, and you got to choose which ones are based on real accounts and which ones are completely made up. And so they got to this one where I thought it was completely made up. It was so far-fetched, but it had to do with vampires, and it was based on true events. And it was basically at some kind of blood bank, I think in the 50s or 60s, these creatures, let's say call them humans, they came in through like windows or something. And they went in and grabbed bags and bags of blood. And I think they attacked some. I got to find the real story, like the whole thing. But it was basically, they were trying to portray them as vampires breaking in and stealing blood as a way so they didn't have to drink it from people. So it's like, what is that? Like, what is that? Was just somebody on meth? Is like something? Is that how like the zombie thing came across? Like, remember in Florida, somebody was eating people because they were
the bath salts.
Yeah. So it's like, what is that? That's a weird story. Like, why would anybody steal that many bags of blood? I don't know.
I mean, and this is again, I also, I don't know how, I look to Sky on this question and not try to ignore you Blue, but how do you approach the subject of cryptid? Because I kind of feel that the middle ground person like me is sort of, it's hard to kind of, I love the legends, I find them fascinating, and I'm open to the idea of someone, give me some evidence and I'll listen to it. But at the same time I'm not going to dive whole, 2 feet, forward into something like, people attack a blood bank and go, well, that must be, vampires. I'm not saying that's what you were saying, but my mind would go to, there was probably a lot of drugs involved on that point or something. But I find that when you're sort of in a middle, I feel like the cryptid situation is can become very black and white.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of frustrating because I'm like, no, I want to believe in something. I'm just not going to give completely into craziness.
Yeah, how I think you sound like an average person, because I feel like you kind of feel the way I do. But I hope everyone can be open-minded. Do I think Bigfoot is real? No. But I'm not going to close my mind off. And like, I will treat it like it's real until I'm proven right or wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's the fun of it. Like, that's what I think real belief is belief leads to this simulation of the universe to mold the world. Because if you think of all the great philosophers, I think therefore I am, be positive, even mantras, saying the same thing over and over it does work. And whether it makes you more confident or changes the universe around you, I think there is power in belief. And so what's wrong with believing in it? No, not hurt nobody. It's not like it's a terrible creature that's going around like, destroying people. Like you never hear, oh my God, Bigfoot tore this man apart. No, it's more like, oh, he ran away. He doesn't want to be involved with us. And it could be because like if these Bigfoots are olden time giants, they learned their lesson. They were like, no, God doesn't want me to talk to you guys. Like whoever God is, whatever we're perceiving that to be, they don't want us intermingling. They sent a flood to get rid of us. So I'm going to hide out here away from you guys. But it's like at one point that you're getting Bigfoot tracks and a lot of it can be debunked, but a lot of it hasn't been able to be debunked. And if it's fake, should it be easy? Yeah, should it be easy to debunk it then if it's fake?
Yeah.
And I think this is where if someone was to say to me, "Do you believe in Bigfoot or Nessie?" I would say no, but I do believe in the legend, and I believe that in the sense of I believe in the culture and the circumstance that created that legend.
Yeah.
So I believe that there were stories, and there may well have been, again, just very loosely saying, is that maybe at one time there was a species of man or man ape that was larger, and eventually that phased out.
Well, did you hear what happened? What was it, like 2 years ago? Look it up for me. What's that guy's name? Dawson. Did you hear about this Dawson guy here? He was driving somewhere in America, and he started videotaping a mountain in the background, and it looked like there was a 30-foot giant, like on the mountain. And we thought like maybe it was a building, a play of lights or whatever. And so the guy came back the next day and it wasn't there anymore. He said that while he was there, he ran into someone who says they were CIA or something like that, some kind of federal government, and told him to go away. It's closed. And I think they were in Canada's side too, so he thought it was really weird. And so he blew up on TikTok. Like he's like, yeah, look at this giant I found. And, the government's telling me stay away. And then a week later, he dropped a video where it looked like one of those, Middle Eastern terrorist videos where like they're holding the paper, looking to the side to what they should say. That's how he looked. And he's like, oh, I made it up. That's not real. Then a week after that, he made another video where somebody in the same car that the officer who told him the road was closed was in front of his house. And he has video of him running out to the car and driving off. It looks totally fake, by the way. It doesn't look real. But that man went missing a week or so later. Like, it's weird. Like, and it's not okay. Sure, it's weird, but it involves giants. And whenever stuff like happens against the norm of what we perceive to be real, weird shit happens.
Yeah, it says when you look it up, it says the Men in Black got him.
See, they think the Men in Black got him. Like he disappeared. His family doesn't know. They presume he's dead. And he blew up on TikTok on those 2-3 videos and just disappeared. And it's the same thing with those Las Vegas aliens. Mm-hmm. They blew off and then they were like, we want to know what happened. We want to tell people, but nobody wants to talk to them. Why? I don't understand. This country is so big on believing in the supernatural crazy. And then when it happens, where someone's being persuaded, because I can't see, like you, Max, if aliens like went in your backyard and you actually went and told people like, yo, there's something here, why wouldn't we want to talk to you about it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And nobody wants to talk to these people, and I don't get it. Why is it every time? And it's always weird shit, and it's always like happening lately, like that woman who flipped out on the plane. He's not real. That mother, how was it she say?
That motherfucker right there is not real.
And then she disappears too. So she's saying like some guy on the plane was like shape shifting or something, and she disappeared. And it's like
I don't think she disappeared, but nobody's talking about it anymore.
Yeah, but she also like she didn't disappear. She went off the radar. Yeah. And then she came back with a lawyer and like a statement from the lawyer to read to everybody. But like she's like, oh, I'm gonna talk about it in a show, and that show never came out. Mm-hmm. And it just stacks on and stacks on. Do you remember a couple years ago? I keep bringing up past stuff because this is all like that weird stuff. Do you remember 2 years ago, Logan Paul told the universe, told the world that he has video tape footage of a UFO, and it went viral for like 2 months. Do you remember seeing this, Max?
I don't remember that.
I don't remember that. I remember seeing. I kind of tend to avoid Logan Paul when his name comes up.
Me
because
too.
He's a bit of a douche.
Yeah, me too. Just
But
look up Paul or Logan. I forget which one it is, and UFO. Like he went on his podcast and he goes, "Yeah, he had a button camera on. Some dude had an old VHS test from like the '90s or something like that, and everyone around him knows about it. And he stole it basically from him and said he was going to release it. And then all of a sudden, he just stopped talking about it. And then when his buddy called him, one time his co-host was on a different podcast, and he called Jake Paul and was like, "Yeah, tell him about this UFO video." And the guy's like, "Man, I can't talk about that. Like, why you bothering me with this? Leave me alone." And hung up on him. So it's like, all right, if it's not real, why is it weird? Why is it weird? I just don't get it. And I blame the government. I blame whoever's covering this stuff up because you're making it weird. It's weirder what you're doing than what's going on. Personally, anyway.
you
No,
think
it's
they're
true.
acting too suspiciously?
It's getting to the point where, like I said, one or two things happens, it's a coincidence. But now there's like a pattern of weird things happening, and then no one talks about it, or they disappear, or nobody wants to ask them questions.
Yeah.
And that's just confusing to me because we had thousands of people trying to, rush in on Area 51, and you're telling me a handful of people, a YouTuber, a podcaster, what doesn't want to go over there and talk to them about their experience?
Some of that really gives me it kind of creeps me out slightly. And this is like, even now I'm just like this is probably one of the reasons I don't go too far into the cryptids and the conspiracies, is because I end up just freaking myself out. It's some of it is so it's so fascinating, and then there's other times where you read stories and you're like, that's very clearly an owl. You are very clearly attacked by an owl.
Well, how do you feel about my theory that Bigfoot is just some kind of Nephilim or Anunnaki offspring? Do you think that's more or less likely than say that the aliens? Well, I guess that would mean alien too, because those are
It's a, what do you say again? A Nephilim?
Nephilim. Yeah, in the Bible, Nephilim are the giants that the Watchers made, and the Watchers are the Okay, so this is like one of those books of Enoch. I don't know if you heard of Enoch.
No.
I've heard of it. I couldn't tell you details about it.
All right, so we'll go a little biblical real quick. In the Bible, there is mention of a character named Enoch. He's only mentioned once, and he's like the great grandfather of Moses.
Yeah.
So the book of Enoch was taken out of the Bible and goes missing for thousands of years, and it gets found in, I think, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Jewish and the Catholics say that it's not canon. And it's because in this book, Enoch says that there is a group called the Watchers who were appointed by God to look over us. But instead of looking over us, they came down and started breeding with us, i.e., just like, Zeus did in Greek mythology and all these other gods that do. It's a common theme that the gods are, our human women are just too beautiful and sexy that they can't help it. And so they make the Watchers and the humans make Nephilim, which are the giants, and they mentioned that in the Bible a couple times. They mentioned being really tall, stuff like that, and that the flood is generally anointed to get rid of us, the wicked, but there is some what is it called? Readings of it, like they translate it to mean that they were trying to get rid of the giants of the Nephilim, and so that's why I basically think is like this is some kind of Nephilim offspring with more humans, and that's why they turn kind of hairy, because the Anunnaki said that they came down and basically, and it's been debunked by the ancient astronauts, but I still think it's like one of those interesting stories that show they actually have a lot of details that other stories tell. So it's like, can you really say it's false even though it's fake? Because it still touches on other people's religions and ancient texts, and they were basically these giant gods, aliens, came down and mixed themselves with us, and maybe Bigfoot was one of the versions of them, of us, because even in these ancient texts, we're not even the first humans. The flood took out the first humans, or that could have been the fourth or the fifth humans, for all we know. Humans have been around for millions of years, so we really don't know how far back these things can go. Like as you said earlier, the dream state the Dream Warriors from Australia, they go back. Some say even 50,000 years.
Let's make it count. Make it count.
I think again, as I said earlier, you know, I don't, I do believe there are lake monsters. I do believe there is something, a Bigfoot. There is a legend. There's a reason for all these legends, you know. And I think that the biggest issue that you kind of start to get with a lot of it is the population question. You know, when you look at the Loch Ness monster. Now, I've been up to Loch Ness with my family, and that was when I was 8, so about 32 years ago, and we saw something in the water, a line going across the water, and it was all very mysterious. And you were standing there, and it was very clear why people would come to this space and feel there could be something in that water. And likewise, I'm sure if you went up to Washington State and you stood in the middle of that vast, beautiful forest full of, the tallest trees, you could see why people believe that there could be creatures out there, especially when you mix that again, both Bigfoot and Nessie have religious texts or texts from, early faith-based that discuss them. It's all part of this legend. But do I believe in the actual specifics of a plesiosaur style creature in Loch Ness? It's really hard to believe that, because in order for that to survive, there'd have to be a population of them. And that's something that we'd have seen by now. And it's the same with Bigfoot. But I do believe, I'm open to this idea. And it's likewise, it's the same for me and aliens and extraterrestrials. I don't necessarily believe in the aliens that are described in the common lexicon, but I'm not going to sit there and say, oh no, there's no way that there's anything else out there. We are definitely the only things in this universe.
You know who I blame for that? And I'm joking, but I'm also being like low-key serious. I blame Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a smart guy who's very into science and astrology, but he has no beliefs. And it's like, well, it can't be real because of this. And he looks down on I don't know. I feel like anytime I hear him in the interview, he's always tearing down something. And it's like, and then he does admit when he's wrong, but I do feel like that's very much the mindset of people who learn things. It's once you learn it, that's what you believe, and you don't want to hear anybody else's opinion. And nope, you're right, because you have all this science, but you know how much science you don't understand? So you can't you can't say that you know for sure when there's stuff you like. Even quantum mechanics stuff is confusing, space stuff, like you don't know everything, so you can't really say. Like, sure, as far as you can tell in this moment, study says it's not, but you can't really even say that yourself either.
Yeah, and it's hard to have this conversation and not sound like a complete, one conspiracy theorist on it. But you have to, and I don't. When I say that science is a concept, science. I believe in science, but at the same time, science is based on our own understanding. There's no finite explanation for everything. That's not to say you dismiss science, because the science that we work with, to an extent, has been proven. But at the same time, is science itself is based on a faith of that there being something else out there. Because if there wasn't something else out there, we wouldn't be asking any more questions. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of. I don't. He's a very American. We don't really have him in England. And he's someone I've only really come to know over here. Is that for him to be so dismissive as a man of science, it is such a curious thing, because you could say, yes, he's a scientist and deals with facts, but at the same time, where's the curiosity in his own mind? Yeah, and that's a very curious thing to consider. Is like, how can you have a scientist that only believes in fact?
Yeah, or can it be like Doctor Strange, where he's a scientist and he can believe in freaky shit?
But ultimately, for me, cryptids are like the perfect balance between science and faith. They are, they're not proven. At the same time, they're not completely and utterly dismissed. So I feel that if more people were open to the idea of cryptids, then there'll be more people at the table to have the bigger conversations, and there'll be just more people coming together.
Yeah. And
That's beautiful.
as I want to remind everyone too, the word conspiracy theorist comes from the CIA, and they told people that they were that because they were getting too close to the truth. So if you want to actually take that and broaden it, maybe that's where we're at, where we're kind of being like, no, don't say anything about that. You're hiding it. Like, let's not talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Blue, go ahead, finish it off.
All right. Well, that was it for today then. I hope you all learned something new.
By the way, your hair looks great, by the way.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh.
I can't see Max.
I'm sure Max's hair looks great too.
It does. It does look great. I think he used a little mousse today.
Yeah, just a little bit.
But yeah, this was a really interesting conversation. I feel like I learned a lot. And
I saw you quietly taking it in.
yes, sorry, I was a little bit quiet. I didn't really know how to contribute.
That's
But
fine.
you guys, I don't know. I found it informative and nice to hear you guys.
We'll call it
talking about-
parallel play.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for joining in today's show. This is Cross Discussions on Good Morning Earth, which is our new name for the podcast. So if you're seeing something different and you're used to 87.9 WKMU, that's us. We just went to a Good Morning Earth as a general. We still go underneath the umbrella of WKMU though, because that goes into gaming and YouTube and everything like that. So I think WKMU is like the production company now,
Okay,
and Good Morning Earth is actually the podcast.
that sounds good.
So
All right,
thank
thank you
you,
so
Max.
much, Max.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Remember, this
I know,
is
thank
Max
you for
from Bitches
having me
with
on and for
Beards.
creeping me out.
Good. If you're creeped out, that means some of our listeners are creeped out, and that's always good for business.
Right. Creep out your guests and your customers.
So everybody, check on yourselves, check on your friends.
And everyone deserves love, even you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
This has been a Good Morning Earth production.
No, remember, this is
signing
still
out.
WKMU.
Oh, okay, sure.
So-
This has been at 87.9
No,
WKMU.
hold on. Just do the WKMU, because we dropped the 87, just so this has been a WKMU production.
This has been a WKMU production, signing out.
Bye.
Bye.
Good morning, Earth. It's time to get up. Bright new day ahead. Let's make it count. make it count.
This concludes our broadcast day. Good night, and God bless America.